Part 9 of True or False, we're going to look at the question of what starts the downswing. And most people that come to me for a lesson, they've read up on Ben Hogan or other great players, or they've come to the conclusion themselves that the hips start the downswing. And I think the pre-shot routine is a science, it's almost an absolute. Pretty much the backswing could be an absolute. But when it comes to the way the hips work in the golf swing, rather than being a science, it's an art. And I think that the leg action changes, and what initiates the downswing varies from shot to shot and from club to club. So, if I was to hit you a golf shot with my 6-iron, if I swung the top and stopped, and then everything went, I believe the club, body, hips and legs would go together. So why was it when I was a youngster, looking at photographs of great players like Byron Nelson and Tommy Lima and Ben Hogan, that it was patently obvious that the club was stationary or bowed at the top, and by that time the hips had already started the downswing. In Sam Snead's case, there was a bit of a squat in the knees that David Ledbetter picked up in the 80s. So, even in Hogan's book, Hogan said at the very top of the backswing, he starts with it by clearing his hip. So, let me give you my take on that. I believe that hand action is instinctive. If I ask you to pass me a cup of coffee, you step across the kitchen, you grab the coffee cup and walk towards me. And your leg would be in sympathy with your hand, no conscious thought. If you reach the coffee and pass it to me, your legs will be moving instinctively. Let's imagine, however, that I lures you to a falling vase. Catch that vase, I'd shriek, and you'd go like that. And your hand and your leg would be as quick as each other. Again, you wouldn't be thinking about the legs, and yet the legs would get there with the hand. So, there's another level of reflex movement, and I believe it's a reflex anticipation. If you asked me to spin a pebble across a pond, and I think if you videoed me, you would see that my hip and my leg went first. Now, obviously you saw it in slow motion, you'd be forgiven for thinking that my hip and my leg consciously started the downswing, but I don't think it does. I think it's a reflex anticipation. So, in the normal golf swing, if we did this in slow motion, and Simon the cameraman will give you a slow motion version after I've hit this shot, I think what you'll see is you'll see a creation of power, a coiling, and then the hips and the legs leading in the normal golf shot. So here we go, I'm going to coil and release and trust my legs to win the race. Load the shoulder. Okay. I think you'll see in slow motion that my hips and legs started the downswing. I don't think it's a conscious thing, I think it's something that happens automatically. Now, let's suppose I was hitting a fade shot. I would set up, go around the circle and play across the ball. And I believe my leg action would change slightly. I would load. Now again, I think my legs would have started the downswing, but I think my left leg would straighten a bit more with the fade. I think in the draw spin movement, when we tend to shallow the plane, I think the hips and the legs will be even quicker than they were the fade. So here we go. Setting up to go around the circle to help me hit the draw. I'm going to load and release a draw. Now, when I get that draw spin shot, my hips and my legs were moving faster than the fade. So that's my take on leg action. I believe you have to understand it. I don't believe it's a conscious thought. Mr. Hogan fought a shut face with a strong grip most of his early career. So it'd be quite understandable if Hogan believed at the top the hip should clear first. And in the good player, I understand that. But most of my weekend warriors hit the ball to right anyway. Clearing the hip as the first thing tends to make things worse. So, as for most of my instruction, don't worry too much about the swing, worry about the shot. But understand the leg action is instinctive and changes with the shot and with the club that you're using.